Hello and welcome to another one. Dre. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, comment, and subscribe. So, this one today is going to be, in particular, for women, but any guy that comes across this, listens all the way through to the end, please be sure to leave a comment down below if you feel that I missed anything, maybe cut something short, so on and so forth. If there's enough of them, I'll probably do a part two. Like so many other conversations that I've had on this channel, this one is inspired by some of the personal conversations I've had with folks in my everyday walk. Why does he leave, or why does he not stay? I guess those are two questions that a lot of really solid women sometimes end up asking themselves. There's some that I've come across that, on its face, it's like, yo, these are really solid stand-up women. It's kind of surprising that they have a mind and desire to be partnered and married, and they aren't. And then it's kind of like, you do a little bit of a deep dive, and as a guy, I start to recognize a few things that, I don't necessarily want to call it like red flag, but I see things that could be issues. I guess you could say like cautious sign. So, first thing is being stuck in routines and being basically stuck in your ways. So, one of the biggest things that I come across with folks who have been single for a very long time, a lot of times they get into their daily routine and they do not want to compromise or change anything about it. So it becomes one of those things where, like, how they have their day scheduled out is this way, boom, 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 boom. And a lot of times it can be a issue in this regard. Like, once we become serious about somebody and they want they want to spend time with us, or even if you take certain steps in your relationship, like say for instance, with how you date, or even if you go over to each other's home and start to, say for instance, do certain tasks. Sometimes what I've found is they're very peculiar about the way that they do things. They don't like to compromise or change anything in those particular ways. And, without going too much into specifics with any one conversation, it's one of those ones where I feel like the longer a person has been out and on their own, the more this one can come into play. And it's simply one of those things where, like, I mean, we as people, we may not like to admit it, but we are creatures of habit. And once we kind of get into a particular routine and rhythm, it can be a little bit hard to break sometimes. And especially when you're trying to get to know someone, not being able to set aside some of those non-specifics, tasks, discerning, what this can wait or this has to be done now, not triaging things properly, not compromising on certain things, like, what, they came over, I cooked, they're willing to wash the dishes. I'm being all anal about how they're doing the dishes. I'm being all anal about how they're wiping the counters down. So it sounds little, but sometimes those little things can be really big to individuals. And it can be somewhat off-putting sometimes, because it's one of those things where it's like, like, yo, I like you, I want you, and it's like, yo, I'm trying, and it's almost like that effort goes, I won't say like unappreciated, but it doesn't translate necessarily all the time. Second thing, in addition to routines, it kind of builds upon it. And I would say this probably is like one of the biggest, at least in my opinion. Um, is there a role for that person to fulfill? Is there space? Actually, I'll combine. I was gonna do three, but I'll combine them. They basically almost the same. Is there a role for that person to fulfill? Is there space in your life for that person? So you might be like, Dre, what exactly do you mean? So as men, we're natural problem solvers. And generally, when we see a problem or we're presented with a problem, especially one in which we have the expertise, we like to solve it or we like to work on it. And one of the things that I find sometimes is folks don't understand how off-putting it can be for a man to be somewhere where there's no role and purpose for him. And what I mean by that is simply this, like, um, he ain't looking to be Superman and save the world for you. But if there's nothing for him to do in that relationship, if there's no role for him to fulfill, then that becomes one in which it, how do I want to phrase it? It becomes one in which his very nature kind of begins to come into play, and it's rough to power through. And on top of that, in terms of the space part of that, is there space in your life for that man? You know, in addition to kind of being set in our ways, a lot of times we don't make space for that person to come into our lives. And what I mean by that is, I'll use this one as a common one. A lot say that they want to be married. However, their children are sleeping in bed with them. And what I mean by that is simply this, like, if you're desiring intimacy, if you're desirous of those connections and those places where they would be that proximity, there's nowhere for them to come in. It's kind of what I'm getting at here. It's deeper than a kid be sleeping in the bed. Like, that's in and of itself. That's a whole nother subject. I'm not gonna go all the way down there, but in and of itself, on its face, not necessarily a problem. Like, sometimes your kids get scared. Sometimes your kids are really just wanting that connection with you, and those are things that they do make you feel good as a parent. But what I'm getting at is, do we have that space to be able to step into? And essentially, how do I want to phrase it? Do we have that space to step into? Is there a role? Is there a particular thing that we can do? Is there a point, basically, to being with you? Is it simply, you look nice, you're good, this, that, and the third, and that's kind of it? Or is it one of those things in which, what, I love her, she loves me, she does X, Y, and Z, and I do my best to do A, B, and C for her? Basically, that's the kind of the crux of what I'm getting at. Like, we have to make sure that we're making space for that person to come into our lives. And when we don't make space for that person to come into our lives, what we do is we put that suitor in a very, very strange place for them. Essentially, they're somewhere where they don't have a role. There's no niche for them to fill, and excuse me, um, depending on how things go, they may not be able to necessarily readily create a role for themselves. And because there's no role, there's no space, because there's no proximity there in terms of a role and a niche and a dynamic to be formed, they essentially feel forced out. And then I guess the final one would be, do you understand that, man? A lot of times, people talk about the importance of safe spaces for certain groups of people, and how important it is to be able to emotionally express oneself. What I'm getting at with this one is, as a society, a lot of times when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about it from a female standpoint, and we don't realize the biological differences between men and women. Like a lot of this social theory going on nowadays essentially treats men and women as completely equal and the same. It's just insert term here, like birthing person or seminator or whatnot. Like that's the only difference between us, and it's not. There are certain things that go way, way deeper. And our sex and gender plays a big role in that. And one of which I would say is even the approach to emotions. Girls and women generally treat emotions as a state of being, whereas men treat certain emotions, i.e. the negative ones, as a call to action. And to illustrate what I mean by that is simply this. A woman would more than likely say, like, yeah, I feel sad right now. I hate being this way, or I hate feeling this way. Whereas a lot of guys, especially if that emotion is strong enough, it will evoke a call to action for them. I'll use myself. Like, I was nearly 300 pounds once upon a time, and I did not feel great about myself. It was physically strenuous, even just bending down and tying my shoes. And it was one of those things where I said, enough is a fucking enough. I feel like shit, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and I am tired of this. And I got my big ass in the gym, and I slimmed down, lost 100 pounds. So that's kind of what I mean with the dynamic at play there. A lot of times when we talk about emotional intelligence, when we talk about those safe spaces, from a man's perspective, a lot of times they may not receive that empathy. And I'm not talking about full on agreement or anything like that, but just simply the space and proximity to express yourself and simply say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. When certain things happen, I do this, I do that. or when you do X, it makes me feel like Y, and so on and so forth. So it's like, you know, I do feel that you have to put some degree of effort into actually getting to know and understand that person and their walk. Because a lot of times, especially when children are involved, um, this isn't a downplay the role that women have, that in the cases when they are the primary caregivers, but it's this almost this flippantness, like, oh well, you're the dad, you don't go through anything. It's like, nah, he's going through things. You know, it is one of those things in which sometimes even trying to quantify what he's going through, what he's feeling, is different. Just by it being a different circumstance, what he's going through is different. And having empathy still for that person to be able to express themselves and, you know, be able to come through and do certain things, and be that safe space for that person. Because a lot of times it's easy to just simply write off certain things, like, oh, well, you know, you don't go through this, or you don't go through that, or you aren't dealing with this. Yeah, but he's dealing with something. He is. I can promise you that. Like, especially, I'll just speak for myself. Being in the deep south, like, yo, there's sometimes like life will slap you right in the freaking face. I remember stopping at having a great day one time. Stop somewhere, and dude is eyeing me up and down, and apparently I was in a sundown time. I hear dude's like, yeah. Dude called me Mr. Nigga on his under his breath to his friend. I'm like, what? But it it's one of those things where just because we don't have the same experience doesn't invalidate that we do have an experience that does carry gravity, that does have certain things that can affect us both inside and outside that relationship, which, you know, when it comes to empathy, I would say that it's a skill that not everybody readily availably has. But the first place to start with empathy, with showing and expressing it, is just allowing that person the space to get off what they need to get off, and not immediately trying to rebut it. Let them put it out there, let them fully emote, let them fully express themselves. And once they've gotten it all out, if they're in the space where they can talk through it, talk through it. But I feel like I'm starting to ramble a little bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this short. So those are some of the reasons why, in my opinion, some of the reasons why he leaves. You know, lack of understanding of him, lack of a role in space, being stuck in our ways. I mean, these are things that I feel, especially when you combine some of them all together, these are things that I feel can really, really alienate somebody and put a relationship in a strained place, especially when coupled with that last one where there's that lack of empathy, that lack of understanding for the other person's experience. And understand, empathy is a two-way street as well. But yeah, that's kind of it. Those are some of the ones some of the big ones I can think of off the top of my head. Fellas, if any of you guys are still rocking with me at this point, Be sure to drop a comment down below if you feel like I missed anything, or if you feel like, hey, yo, you pretty much you caught all the big ones. You were spot on. Good job, Dre. I would appreciate that as well. But don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And thank you all. Hope you have a happy new year if I don't make any more videos. Thank you. Have a great one.